as to the front pages as usual, lots and lots of different stories today. The Mail on Sunday leading with the Duchess of York, Fergie, trying to get £250 million for the fake Mazhar Mahmood Sheikh sting. That's really exciting to the newspapers, perhaps less so to the rest of us. The Observer has a big Brexit story here. Europe's leaders to force the UK into a hard Brexit. And there is a sense today that the options in front of the government are narrowing, that on the continent they're saying must be a hard Brexit. Lots of Tory MPs are saying there should be a hard Brexit as well. The Sunday Times, the Queen will invite President Trump to Windsor, which is apparently going to help us a lot. And a very moving story here by their writer A.A. Gill, who's getting married and has cancer. We're going to be talking about that. Also a very interesting story here. Apparently Tony Blair, remember him, he's coming back. He thinks the Prime Minister is a lightweight and Jeremy Corbyn is a nutter. So I'm back, says Tony Blair. We'll see how that goes. And then finally, the Sunday Telegraph, a tax raid on middle-class salary perks. That's things like private health insurance and cars and so forth. It predicts for the autumn statement. I don't know if Philip Hammond will tell us about that. And, of course, the extraordinary picture of Ed Balls doing his thing in Blackpool, which we all watched yesterday. Rather against my instinct, he is the overnight success and shows a way back into politics that we hadn't seen before. John Longworth, however, let's start with proper politics. And you've chosen something, I think, from The Sun and a piece also by Dan Hodges in the Mail on Sunday.
Yes, I chose as my opener Philip Hammond, the Chancellor, writing in The Sun about his vision for the autumn statement, and Dan Hodges writing about Philip Hammond and how that stacks up. I think the Chancellor is on the right track to begin with. He's talking about stimulating the economy, about providing infrastructure development and so on. Hodges is saying, actually, this is the death of Osborne-omics, that George Osborne's... well, that's what Hodges is saying. And he's saying that this is Keynesian economics. Of course, Keynes himself said, when the facts change, I change my mind, and was very flexible in terms of his economic approach. And I think that's exactly what the government need to do, and what Philip Hammond needs to do in the autumn statement. The overriding thing of these two articles for me is one of the fringe benefits of Brexit is it gives the UK the opportunity to create the best economy in the world. And this is what the Chancellor needs to set out to do, not necessarily all in one go, but in stages. We need to be creating the sort of economic backcloth where enterprise can flourish and the UK ends up being the best economy in the world.
But if he's facing, we'll see, a £100 billion black hole at the moment, is this kind of level of investment really going to make it, is it a row of beans?
Well, there needs to be some significant investment in infrastructure, and including, for example, wireless and connectivity and fibre in the UK, which is lamentable. But also we need to be talking about investing in skills and training. We need to be investing in science and R&D. We need to be creating increased productivity and all those things that will make the UK a great economy. But as I'll come on to later on the Brexit thing, of course, there's a huge opportunity to crystallise the benefits of Brexit and to do that early. And that will be a massive boost for the economy.
Carolyn, view from the CBI, as it were. You've chosen a piece from the Sunday Telegraph there.
Yes, a couple of pieces here really following on this theme of what we might expect from this autumn statement. So the Sunday Telegraph and also the Sunday Times, just really about how this autumn statement is focusing on the domestic economy and productivity in particular. Roads, skills investment, the areas that John mentioned, is quite a lot of nuts and bolts. Yes, within a more difficult fiscal environment, but the building blocks being put in place to focus on a stronger economy for enterprise, which feels, again, as I agree with John, absolutely the right thing to do.
And what does the CBI feel about the direction of Brexit, the dangers of a cliff edge versus a kind of smooth transition? What are you saying about that?
Well, I'll be picking up on a piece today. The challenges of a cliff edge Brexit, the 1 minute past midnight challenge, is around actually a lot of quite practical things. It's around customs officials. It's around big box warehouses. And I think one of the things that it needs to be really understood is what that would feel like for business and the challenges if that cliff edge were to happen.
And of course, whether it happens or not, we're seeing politicians with their reputations bouncing back again, not least Mr. Nigel Farage. You've got a story about him and Trump.
Yes.
He's trying to milk that moment.
He is, yes. You know,
the
photo that we now know of him going over being the first from Britain to meet up with Donald Trump. And the Sunday Express have got the sort of inside track on what they talked about, and you might have thought it would be the economy or Brexit or whatever, but no, Donald Trump has declared war on Scottish wind farms.
It's his golf course up in the northeast.
Well, yeah, what he said is he's urged Mr Farage to launch a campaign opposing new wind farm developments, saying that they're blighting the beautiful Scottish landscape. But what he actually means probably is that they're blighting the view from my very expensive golf course.
And Simon Walters of the Mail on Sunday has interviewed him, and he says, Farage, that is, not Trump. And Farage says that he wants to try and come back to the House of Commons if there's a Thanet by-election, because the Tories fiddled
Do you think he means that, or do you think he's just being naughty?
Well, he's both. He's a very naughty, very naughty guy.
And also, just linking in, Peter Hitchens in the Mail on Sunday has a theory that he's decided that this actually now is not Donald Trump sent a body double like Saddam Hussein used to, and he thinks it's not his face, it's not his smile.
Like
open neck shirt isn't quite right. He thinks he just sent his hair.
So this is a faked photograph. Very good. Now let's keep going on the economy.
Yep.
And the Tories. You've got the story in the Sunday Telegraph, John. This is a big bunch of Tory MPs, lots of former cabinet ministers, calling for what's now being called a hard Brexit, or you would say a clean Brexit.
Clean Brexit, exactly. I mean, it's a very important story. I think this is Steve Baker MP's probably been involved in organising this group. They're calling quite rightly for a clean Brexit. As you can imagine, you know, as co-chair of Leave Means Leave, I very much support this. I'm very much in the view that actually, as you said at the beginning, the UK now has narrowing options in this respect. The Continentals actually want us to leave cleanly. It would actually be in our interests to actually do that and do it as soon as possible. We ought to trigger Article 50 early in order to crystallise the benefits of Brexit as soon as possible. And those benefits, of course, include, for example, free trade. If we actually reduce tariff barriers, it could boost the economy by over 60 billion. And we should deregulation.
We should make clear to people, I'm looking at Carolyn here as well, make clear to people that if we try to stay in the customs union, we can't then do the kind of free trade deals that people might want in other parts of the world. It is quite a tough choice between you're in it or you're out of it. And if you're out of it, then there is a bit of a cliff edge. There's no way of getting around that. But you can do your trade deals around the rest of the world. That seems to be the narrowing choice at the moment.
I think those choices are coming down to that. And to be absolutely clear, I mean, businesses now are just full steam ahead in trying to get the best Brexit, and do see opportunities in trade deals around the world. I was in China and India recently, and there are real opportunities there. But it is this question of how you get there in a way that doesn't create uncertainty around regulation and what actually happens at customs borders. And I think those are the issues that now need to be really confronted.
To talk it up, because when I do hear figures in authority sort of doing the whole Brexit, I sort of think that's going to be sort of self-prophesying doom and gloom.
Confidence is hugely important for the economy, always, and of course it can be a self-fulfilling prophecy. You know, if you actually talk the economy down, talk Britain down, as some business leaders are doing, of course, as well. It's very, very important that we actually look at the positives, and there'll be winners and losers within the business community. The economy as a whole will win. But the winners will be the ones who embrace a new future, a better future, rather than trying to hang on to a poorer version of what we had before.
Well, let's turn to a man who is certainly embracing the positive, Adrian Gill, AA Gill of the Sunday Times, with a double announcement today.
Yes,
he's a friend of yours, I think.
He is a friend of mine. I'm having lunch with him on Wednesday, assuming he doesn't cancel me. And I did say to him, I hope... AA Gill, for anyone who doesn't know, is the writer on the Sunday Times. He's the theatre critic, he's the TV critic, restaurant critic, and
former husband of the Home Secretary, and very interestingly, a dyslexic who's written about it. He
severely dyslexic,
and yet, when I presume he dictates,
he does.
One of the best writers in the business.
Oh, but I personally think he's a genius, and I don't use that word very often. And I said to him, I do hope you're going to write about this, because I thought about his cancer, because I thought it will be the definitive article on having cancer. So he obviously is going to write about it, but he says here, you know, there is barely a morsel of offal, he's talking about himself, that is not included in his cancer. I have got a trucker's gut-buster, gimpy, malevolent, meaty malignancy. And this is what we're going to expect from Adrian. He's going to write beautifully about it. And he's quite sort of positive and upbeat. It was found on the spine and in the lung. But what I like most of all about it is he's determined to go with the NHS, because he says that there is a human connection in the NHS. And he said, my father always said, I don't want to die in the trenches. He said, I don't want to die in a trench in Harley Street.
Very good for him. All right, and we must turn now to the other huge story of the week, of course, which is Ed Balls, as it is every week. Again and again and again, he cavorts ridiculously and the country goes wild. What is going on, Carolyn?
Well, I have to say I loved this spread from the Telegraph because it's all the really, really serious stuff about Brexit. And in the middle, there's this amazing photograph of Ed Balls, who just danced his socks off last night. And there
Not
is
very well.
But that's the point of Strictly. It's the journey.
It's the dad dancing, yeah.
It is. And here is just brilliant light relief in the middle of some really serious news. And, you know, power to his elbow and his dancing shoes.
So, final story, John, on the theme of politicians' makeovers. You've got the Sun there.
I think Ed Balls dances as well as I do. My wife would attest to that. Yes, I mean, makeovers, it's interesting how, of course, people project images onto the famous and the politicians. I remember listening to a little interview with Margaret Thatcher in her early days. It was repeated just recently, where apparently she never wore a twin set, and yet twin set and pearls and a hat was how she was always represented. So it's very interesting how these politicians are actually making over, and why that's important to identify them and identify their characters. Boris, of course, has had his hair cut recently. I believe it's at Harvey Nichols, and he's looking very smart.
He still does that thing every time, doesn't he?
But they are, despite what everyone thinks, real people.
They are.
There's a final story.
Yes,
I said it was the last story, but there's a story about what's going on in Japanese
Japan has
dating.
a bit of a crisis. It had a marriage crisis anyway. It's now having a relationship crisis because, according to research by the Japanese government, there are about 30% of single women and 15% of single men who are now falling in love with memes or virtual characters in a game. And that's actually higher than the amount of people there that fall in love with, say, a pop star or whatever. And there are hotels that they can go to, a whole subculture, go with their meme console partner for a romantic break, etc., etc. So it's worrying. You know, when I see people in restaurants now, both on their phones, they're not talking to each other, they're talking to other people, and it's a worry. So is it you, Andrew, here, or are you a cyberbot? That's what I want to know.
So long as I'm attached to the mains electricity, I'm completely normal. Thank you all very much.